In an ideal world, a fight within the realms of mixed martial arts should be utterly decisive, and this holds especially true for the top promotions within the industry, such as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Whenever a new UFC card rolls around, there's always a great deal of hype for the fights, so nobody wants to have that excitement fall flat due to a controversial or disappointing ending. Now, of course, it's important for reference to step in and to end a fight when one of the competitors clearly cannot go on, but unfortunately, sometimes the referees get things wrong and call an end to fights that really should have continued. In this video, we'll be going over some of the most heinous examples, so stay tuned. Forget your winning streak. We're starting with a beauty here. Losing a fight by a result of an absurd early stoppage is probably bad enough, but I'd imagine losing a fight by a result of an absurd early stoppage would cause your 3-fight winning streak to end? Yeah, that's really bad. Rick Fike was the referee for this bout between Aaron Riley and Shane Nelson, the former being the one who had this winning streak cut short by what has been labeled as one of the worst stoppages in UFC history. Taking place in March 2009 as part of UFC 96, the fight opened with some pretty standard, cagey stand-up between two fighters, only beginning to size each other up. Neither of these men came out swinging for the fences, and it appeared, at first at least, that this would be a slow burn affair between two guys who are known for being able to take some damage and keep going. Granted, Nelson hit a pretty decent show, and Riley did go stumbling backwards, ending up on the ground with his opponent rushing over to take advantage. Nelson even got another good hit on his grounded adversary. But by no means was Riley unable to defend himself. In fact, by the time Fike rushed over to end the fight, Riley was in the midst of pushing Nelson off of him with his legs. If Fike hadn't pulled Nelson away, the likelihood is that he'd been pushed off regardless, but it didn't matter. Nelson wheeled away in celebration, and an extremely cross Riley threw up his arms in baffled confusion. Dana White was quick to label it a bad mistake and promptly organized a rematch, which was won by Riley by unanimous decision. Stoppage leads to gender row. The headline bout of UFC Fight Night 155 in Sacramento. This one ups the ante even more as Aspen Ladd received the first loss of her entire MMA career due to a highly divisive stoppage. Herb Dean was the referee for this one. I wonder if he'll show up on this list again. Who's to say? Ladd was up against former featherweight champion Germaine de Randamie, who was making the switch to the bantamweight division at the time, where the previous entry consisted mostly of a cagey feeling out process between the two fighters before the early stoppage. This one stopped around 9 punches total, give or take. Randamie nailed Ladd with a very clean shot that, in fairness, knocked her to the floor, this being enough for Dean to swoop in and call it into the fight just 15 seconds of the first round. It's important to note here that at no point was Ladd unconscious, though she did take a follow-up punch without doing much to defend herself just before Dean could pull Randamie away. Within seconds, however, Ladd expressed her dissatisfaction with the referee's decision to end the fight, and she wasn't alone in that. Perhaps frustrated by having their main event bout end so quickly, the Sacramento crowd showered the cage with boos. In the aftermath of the event, Ladd lamented the decision whilst Randamie praised it, summing up the debate over whether it was the right call pretty nicely. Not too keen on letting that first loss stick to her record, Ladd and her manager went to the California Athletic Commission with an appeal, accusing Dean of stopping the fight early due to the fact that the fight was being contested between women. Dean obviously denied this, and the commission ended up ruling in favor of upholding the result, though it was a very close 3-2 decision. We've been through a few notable examples of fights being called a tad too early, but now it's time to get to the main event. This next entry is one of the most recent examples of one of these unfortunate decisions, one that even drew criticism from Dana White himself. Lima and Rothwell's controversial finish. The stage was UFC Vegas 42, where UFC's Fight Night emanated from the UFC Apex facility for a card packed with action, including a main event clash between featherweight champ Max Holloway and his challenger Yair Rodriguez, but our story took place in the co-main event. Experienced veteran referee Herb Dean was in charge for a heavyweight bout between Ben Rothwell and Marcos Rogero de Lima. Lima took an early lead in the fight, battering his opponent's leg with repeated kicks before eventually rocking Rothwell with a hard right. The American, stunned by Lima's offense, wobbled and ended up with his back against the cage, which only encouraged the Brazilian further. But as Lima continued his attack, Herb Dean made the decision to end the fight, diving in and grabbing Lima by the waist. displaced. Now, this part was acceptable enough. Most who have criticized Dean have acknowledged that stopping the fight at this point was probably the correct decision. What happened next descended the entire thing into farce, as Dean then let go of Lima, apparently changing his mind about the entire thing. Lima, of course, had stopped any attempt at fighting Rothwell since the referee had stepped in, though Rothwell hadn't got the memo and went for a takedown. With a confused Lima looking to Dean, the referee was left with no choice but to confirm that he was indeed stopping the fight. Lima was declared the winner by TKO after just 32 seconds of the first round, though his victory immediately became secondary to the refereeing controversy. Reaction to Herb Dean. As you can imagine, Herb Dean isn't the most popular man in the world after this incident. Some have made accusations of fight interference, though it seems certain that this was actually just a case of indecisiveness from Dean, as opposed to any active attempt at altering the outcome of the contest. Regardless, he's coming under a lot of heat for the whole affair. Twitter has been, as you'd imagine, utterly brutal in their assessment of a referee who was once seen as the best in the UFC, and it doesn't end with Egg Avatar having randoms from the internet. Former welterweight Dan Hardy, who has been highly critical of Dean in the past, put out a post labeling the referee a liability, complete with a laughing emoji. Even more concerning, current bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling called the fiasco so bad and questioned why the commission is still allowing such terrible refereeing. These are some pretty stinging comments, but hey, it's not like either of these guys are Dean's boss, right? Dana White is kind of though, and boy, is he unhappy with what Herb Dean did. The UFC president's opinion will mean more than anyone's, and he hasn't pulled any punches in his assessment of the incident, declaring that Dean needs to stop touching people until he's ready to stop the fight. This isn't the first time White has criticized Herb Dean in particular, as in 2019, he was quick to label the finish in the Ben Askren/Robbie Lawler fight as a bad stoppage. Dean has proven himself to be a skilled referee in the past, but with so much scrutiny over this recent incident, there's no doubt there'll be a lot of eyes on his next fight for all the wrong reasons. Edgar wanted more time. Another recent example, and probably the most disputable entry on this list, Frankie Edgar and Marlon Vera went at it in a bantamweight bout at UFC 268 at the Madison Square Garden. This fight actually made it all the way into the third round, so there's that at least, but Edgar was left raging by the stoppage decision from referee Todd Anderson. Vera struck Edgar with a front kick, smacking his opponent right on the jaw. Edgar fell to a knee and certainly looked rocked by the strike, leading to Anderson jumping in and ending the fight. Edgar, however, had a lot to say to the media after the bout. The American detailed that his issues with Anderson began well before the first bell, going on a rant about the referee's demeanor and criticizing a call on a strike from Vera that Edgar believed to have been after the bell. Frankie did acknowledge that the referee's job is to ensure his safety, but he argued that his head never hit the mat and he was never unconscious, with Vera making it look worse than it was by pushing Edgar's head back. Part of the frustration also came from the fact that the two fights preceding Edgar versus Vera were action-packed and physical, and neither saw stoppages such as the one in this fight. Dana White came out in support of Anderson's decision, however, noting that while he loves Edgar, the decision from Anderson was a great stoppage and Frankie is wrong to criticize it. And that's everything. What do you think of the Herb Dean incident from Vegas 42? Are there any other controversial early stoppages that you can think of? Feel free to let us know in the comments, and until next time, see you soon.